Obe-san, good evening to you, and right from Japan to US. And which part of US are you in, Obe-san?
Good morning, Dr. M. I am in North Carolina right now.
And here I am, it's good morning here. It's around 10 minutes to 8 o'clock on a Friday morning. And good evening. It must be past 10 o'clock over there, right?
Yeah.
So I hope I get my slides right this time at least.
Yes.
There it is. I got it right again. This is the third attempt I got it right, Obe-san. Never give up. So, Obe-san, you're on the 37th episode of Dr. M's podcast. And thank you very much for being there for me. And there's a second time that you're here, and Obe-san, and last time you were talking to me about point, line, area, body, and from the body you had the mechanism, then you had the structure, then you had the system and the structure. So that's the flow that I remember. And you're a very good teacher, like your father. And he's very popular in US, and everybody knows, most of them know in Kentucky, the people whom I have talked to. And I'm really fortunate to have celebrity, a sensei in your father, and you are a son to him, and you are going to teach us, carry on his legacy. And we are very proud of you all, and for getting us all this concept of Toyota production system and the culture of Japan. We really want to understand Toyota production system the way it is supposed to be understood. So there you are, you're such a passionate practitioner of Toyota production system, the philosophy. And last time I met you, you said you were so interested in the history of Japan by itself. And then, so I won't get a better person than you to tell me all about its culture. And you have worked in different types of industry, in different sectors across the globe. And you're consulting, and you do on-the-job training and off-the-job training. And Obe-san, when are you coming to India?
Whenever there's an opportunity, I will.
I will create an opportunity so that you can come across to India. So you're going to talk to us about Japanese culture and Toyota production system.
Yes.
Right? So I'm going to stop screening, and over to you, Obe-san.
Okay, let me share my screen. Am I on screen?
Yes, sir.
So, Dr. M, thank you for the introduction, the standard work. And like you mentioned, I learned TPS from my father, and I'm trying to summarize what I learned from him. And everything that I summarize is connected to the framework that you mentioned, point, line, area, and body. And it's quite applicable to many different things. And culture is one of the topics that I like to connect. And I'm going to introduce what I learned through, partially my hobby. Like you said, I love history and love every history. But Japanese history is my main focus, and how that historical impact had on TPS. And I'm going to try to use the point and line, that kind of framework to explain this. So, a lot of people talk about Toyota production system, and they would always connect to the Japanese culture. And, just like any culture, we have many unique aspects, many things that is very different from different cultures. And, people like to connect to the differences. And we talk about those aspects contributing to it. but it's also misleading to my opinion, because then it becomes a question of, okay, this is a Japanese culture thing. I'm in the different culture. There's no way I can apply because we are in a different culture. And we need to face this cultural confrontations. One is Japanese system and the other is non-Japanese system. It won't fit. And that's kind of conflict is something that I've been facing a lot of times, and I worked in a lot of places. I actually been to India too, but West or Western countries or Eastern country, I don't care. South or North, I don't care. Every one of them will, even in some part of Japan, will resist and say, okay, it's a different culture. It's not gonna fit. So today I just want to introduce a little bit more detailed analysis of this Japanese culture. And one gentleman called Amino, Dr. Amino, there's no reason to memorize this person because it's just my hobby area. But he started saying, he was one of the early historians that started saying that Japanese culture is not necessarily one culture. It's actually, he said two, but potentially more different cultures exist inside Japan. And inside his framework, he starts saying, okay, there's a Western culture. Mainly the old Japanese came from the west side of the Japan. And these people focus on the village, or they call it the mura culture, which means that they are horizontally equal villages, form alliances, and they form a role. And inside that village, that community comes as number one, and they sustain their living. And that was the core value of the village society. And it's very close. And you can see a picture of there. And this is a picture of these villagers signing a document.
Mm.
And these are, we write the names in symbols in vertical way.
Mm.
And they put each villager's name in the round circle to show that everybody is on the same page. Everybody agrees. And, the guy on the top is supposed to be sort of like the leader, but he's also somewhat equal on this round signature to show that we are aligned to each other. And this is very strong in the Western side of Japan. On the Eastern side of Japan, we have a different culture, according to me. And they will say it's more driven by families. The head of the family, usually the father, he is the head of this community, and he is like the boss or the king. And it's very feudalism. So basically, it's a system of the samurais, right? So the head of the samurai is the head of the samurai family, and most of the family is part of that family. And the boss provides, we call it goon. It's like protection to its followers. In return, the followers provide, being a part of the military, or paying the taxes and stuff like that. So that kind of feudalism system is the core value. And if you think about it, some of the current Japanese society, if you look into our society, a lot of things like lifetime employment, or like some companies, especially like Toyota, sees employee as a family member. You can see some historical leftovers in our culture. And when I was reading this article, actually a book from Amina, I start, visualizing this relationship in the framework that we've been talking about, the points and lines, right? Because when I try to understand their relationship, the Western culture, I can put like a dot as individuals, and we can start creating, horizontally, how important this horizontal relation between each other. I put it in the this kind of shape because that was the signature, the drawing that you saw, and how important for us to always have this horizontal relationships, and then the samurai family, the vertical relation, the boss, and then who are the second rank people, who are the third rank people, what are their roles and responsibility. And when
can I disturb your thought? I'm sorry for that. When you say west, it is the west of Japan, correct?
West of Japan, I'm sorry, yes.
It is east of Japan.
Yes.
And we have a problem across the world of the word mura, because we have got three things that which we think we know in Japanese is muda, muri, and mura.
Yes.
And mura is inconsistency, which is more related with quality when it's not inconsistent. But here you're using mura as village.
Sorry, so I should have explained. Mura, we use a different symbol for village and different symbol for this inconsistency and variances. The pronunciation is the same. It's the same mura, but I'm sorry, not pronunciation is slightly different. Mura and mura. I'm sorry, but it's exactly the same sound. I'm sorry. And yeah, I knew this will get complicated, but
no, it is not complicated. We are just clarifying it that the same word would mean different in Japan, different in the Western world, like or us, because the minute you say mura, we think it is inconsistency. But in Japan, depending probably on your script, mura village would mean is written differently. And mura as inconsistency little differently. Am I right?
Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. I should have explained. Yes.
No. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry for this interruption.
No, and I think and just to continue this example of this cultural differences, right? The West, it starts from this the island, on the western side, and that's where we say that our emperor family, the Tenno family, originated from, and they moved to the Kyoto, which is in the center of Japan. And, they spread we think that they are based on the mura culture, the village culture. In fact, the old Japanese, the country name Yamato means big alliances. And so it means that, the emperor started as a big alliance of tribes in time. And then the eastern, most of the samurai is coming from somewhat close to Tokyo area in the eastern side. And, as the samurais became stronger, they started to go to the west. And the location where Toyota originated is right in the middle of the west and the east, according to this amino theory. And the question now is, which one Toyota belongs, right? And as a individual who grew up in this region, what I can say is that it's a mix. It's a delicate mix of West and East happening in this region. We have a lot of cultural event, like the first picture that I showed on the beginning. There's so many cultural ceremonies. Like I got my wife is from the same region, and we did the wedding there. And we have multiple ceremonies in this wedding, but every time we go through, we have to select, okay, are we going to take the Western version or the Eastern version of the ceremony? Like, the wife family have to do something here, or the husband family have to do something here. The West and the East is different. And every step in that ceremony, we have to discuss and decide which side we're going to do, because every one of them was different here in our region. So Toyota came from this region where this two culture was crashing. And because when there's a cultural confrontation, it's also, historically speaking, there's a lot of places around the world where the culture crashes. It creates an interesting group of people. And just to explain that brief history of that area, it's called the Mikawa. And this area has generated many groups of Japanese people that is very interesting. For example, the Ashikaga samurai family. This is the first samurai family that colonized that region. And they eventually become the shogun of, they are the second shogun family of Japan. And they became in 1336. And they ruled the country for like 150 years, something like that. And I will say like 50% of his followers of the Ashikaga family is originated from Mikawa area. After this samurai the Shogun Ashikaga back ended its rule, there was a war period, and then the Tokugawa family came up, and they ruled Japan since 1603 to 1867, so 250 years almost. And this family and its followers almost entirely, almost like 90%, is from this region. And this region of the western part of Mikawa side, to be more specific. And and that's exactly where Toyota is located, is from. Like when I go to like Toyota factory, I drive by there, and I'm a historian, so I see historical site of this samurai families too. So I get super excited in two ways, right? One, I get to see a very good operation, but I also see a lot of historical monuments and castles and, the site of the war. And yeah, I get super excited because I'm a historical maniac there. But because of this crash of the village culture and the samurai family culture was happening constantly in this region, it also developed an interesting group of people constantly. And I can see that when this group of people manages this culture of the village and the some family, they succeed. And so what I learned from this whole analysis is I don't think there's a value to memorize all these key words, right? A Japanese word, because it doesn't make sense. And there's no reason to memorize all these samurai families. I'm sorry. That's my hobby. But to me, important is every culture probably has this horizontal and vertical relationships, which is strong. I don't know. It depends on that culture, right? There's a stronger horizontal culture or there's a stronger vertical culture. And it's very important for us to understand is how do they build the trust relationships? And that's something I learned in working globally, is to go to the gemba, go and talk to the people and try to understand how this community is developing this relationship of trust in a vertical way and a horizontal way. And then how can I change that to more sort of TPS way? Because and I see that as a sort of like a way of success. Just to give one example, a lot of places try to convince me that their vertical relationship come from fear, right? They will say, "Oh, we have this dictator or this dynasty that control the country vertically. That's how we develop." And fear doesn't work. So I need to say, okay, that doesn't work. Let's look into more detail of your culture and try to find out what are the different ways of trust you are actually developing. And you start working with these people and you start saying, oh, wow, you have a very interesting way of vertically connecting to each other. It's different from the Japanese people for sure, but there is a different way of creating trust. Why don't we use that? Why don't we apply that? And that's something I learned from this historical episode, is like, try to understand this culture in a structural way. By the way, there is a study inside the cultural anthropology that says structuralism, to try to understand the culture in a more structural way. It's a French, whatever, philosophy, but it's too complicated for me. But at least when I go to the show floor and I go to a different country, different culture, I always try to understand this horizontal and vertical aspects. And then I start thinking, okay, inside TPS, there's many concepts. And how can I understand what we are talking about in this horizontal way of, right, horizontal relationship of points and lines? And there's a lot of examples. For example, Jidoka concept, right? They will say, okay, we shouldn't accept, we shouldn't produce, and we shouldn't send defects. And that's the good example of relationship between each other, right? We shouldn't, right? Defect is, and when it's there's no, they don't care about horizontal. Some people might push defect. I don't care because I'm not the one they're going to suffer, right? You've seen that kind of attitude in wrong places, and that's the somewhat a cultural mindset that I need to change. Line balance, right? We balance the line to tax time, and everybody gets an equal amount of work. That's very horizontally, right, centric culture mindset, because everybody is saying it should get same amount of work, fairness, like, right? And then there's concept of yokoten. Once one process improves, similar process should get the same kind of Kaizen, right? It's not like, hey, I made this improvement idea. It's my idea. I'm not going to share it to anybody, right? To be honest, I was in the factory today. One gentleman made a very interesting device to help it. Why don't we yokoten? I mean, I should thank the guy for this great idea, right? I should respect his creativity. I thank him, but this idea should be the community's idea, not his individual idea, right? Continuous flow, right? If we want every process to be continuously flowing all the time. And if you don't have the horizontal trust between each other, we would like to disconnect. We like to keep inventory because I don't trust that the supplier will bring materials to me, or the customer might don't trust us, then they will keep their own inventory. Then it becomes more sort of like system and structure of Toyota. Jishuken, it's called the self-study group, right? And a lot of cross-functional people will come to this Jishuken, usually organized by the topic, but they will form this informal group of people, and sometimes it's called, lower level, you might call it the QC circle or something like that. But they will collect all these cross-functional members, go to the Gemba, understand the problem, but every one of them will take a different responsibility in that activity and try to improve the process. The final concept, I said Doki. I don't have the English word. It means that those people who enter the company in the same year. In Japan, a lot of us, I would say majority of us still start to work at April 1st. And like my case, I started work in 2000. Then I'm a class of 2000 who entered the company. And we go through this first training together, and you create this lifetime bond. My dad's best friend from Toyota is a quality guy. And he said, well, we met we are the Doki. We entered the company at the exact same year. They went through a completely different career path. My dad became the TPS side, and this gentleman went to the quality side. But every time my dad had an issue with quality and he wants to understand better, he will contact his Doki. He might say, I'm going to buy you beer, but now you help me understand this concept. And this gentleman.
I like this. You call it Doki, is it?
Doki, yeah. And I tried to find it.
That is the batch of inductee in the same year. The batch of inductee into the organization in that particular year.
Yes.
So they develop this relationship of exchanging ideas, right?
Exchanging ideas, yes. It could be in a very informal way, right? Like I said, they might be drinking beer together, and then they're suddenly talking about their work context. And they will respect that, okay, one guy is a TPS expert, one guy is a quality expert. I need your help. And they will talk frankly, offline, completely offline. There's no bosses there, and talk about the issues. And, my dad got a little help from a lot of Doki in his life. And, when he passed away, I made sure I contacted his Doki because that was important relationship for him. And he got a lot of support from them every time when he goes through his career. And this kind of relationship typically exists in most Japanese companies. And it's a very interesting network of people.
Mm.
And those kind of formal and informal relationship is building this total production system.
Mm.
And now if I think about the vertical side, yeah, I probably have more examples, but I try to be small. Andong, that's a perfect example of vertical relationship, because when the Ando goes on, the team leader, who is the boss, should come and help the line, right? It's like, it goes back to this samurai, the feudalism, right? If the boss doesn't protect you when you are in trouble, the samurais will not follow. There's no need to follow originally. It changed a little bit in history, but that's okay, right? But that's the same thing. Same thing with Kaizen. I think when I want to get the trust of the people, they provide Kaizen, right? And one example I have is, like, I did Kaizen in one area. After a couple Kaizens, one of the operator gave me cookie and tea, and I was having, fun time with it. And my boss came back, actually my dad came back and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I told them, "Oh, I did some good Kaizens, and I guess the operator liked it. So they're giving me a tea and a cookie here. So I'm relaxing." And then he said, "Oh, you did a real Kaizen. Yeah. The people liked it and they treat you. That means you did a good Kaizen." And he said, "That's a real Kaizen." So if you don't provide a good Kaizen, the people won't trust you. They will not buy into you. And that's the difficult relationship that's going to happen between the boss and its followers, is that, yeah, if you don't put good Kaizen, they will be very hidden. They don't want to share problems. They don't trust you. Once they start trusting you, they will ask for more Kaizens. Another concept, otoshikomu. This is a concept that I think we talked about before. If I translate this concept, it's drop down and include into somebody's work. Every time a boss says a word, or make a statement, through this organization chain, every individual have to break down what that word means to him and include it into his or her work. So it's not like a boss says, we need to reduce, we need to improve quality, and everybody just repeating the same word, right? When it go one level down, that person have to say, okay, what does that improve quality means in my responsibility? Break it down and say, okay, I need to have a better training of people. I need to have a better, how can I say, quality planning system or design. And this is my two goal. I want to improve in this way. You agree that? You put that on A3, and then you deploy it underneath your organization. And then, some of the people might say, okay, in my area, I have 3 big quality issues, so I'm going to work on those. And that will be my main Kaizen, a focus of the Kaizen. So nobody repeats the same word. Every layer of the structure will take some part of the responsibility, dissect what the boss said, and they will put down what are the key points that they need to accomplish, and they communicate back to their boss on A3, and make sure that they are aligned and get to the work, right? So it connects to the Hoshin Kanri system. It's not one way of, the boss is commanding something, or it's top. Yeah, I really hate this top-down discussion, because it's always, I really think, how can I say, the feudalism, right? It's the boss provides something. This both-way direction, vertical relationship creates a strong work, and it's really, I like to call it the total feudal system, because it does look like a samurais that, understanding what the boss wants, and they break it down and they take actions in their territories, protecting and fighting. So that's the kind of way I understood TPS in a structural way, just to give a short summary, right? And this kind of bonds create this culture. And then sorry.
Can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. So the boss just tells that this is what he wants. and then everybody else follows, breaks it down into his area, and he is responsible for that processes, right? The boss doesn't say which process to do or what to do. He just says, this is what I want, correct?
But then once that summary is done, the boss will, look at the A3 together to see if the plan is right.
Alignment.
And then they will continuously come back and follow. They're not going to say, okay, that's good, bye. They will continuously come back and follow. And that's another interesting vertical relationship. It's a continuous followers that makes them strong. It's not like I leave this to you. Now, when it comes to very senior level, they might, set the target and I leave it up to you, but they only leave that to a very senior position. If it's the factory level, you will constantly see the boss coming back and again and again and again to understand the conditions. Yeah, and like one example, I think a lot of people in Toyota have this kind of experience, but my boss, my dad, right? I remember I was working in the factory once and my phone rang and I picked it up and he said, I'm outside the factory, let me in. And he didn't tell me he's coming. And he just came. Why? He wants to see the real condition. Right? He don't want the formal report or just the bullet points on the A3 paper. He wants to understand the real condition and he will randomly pop up to any location without notifying anybody because he wants to see the real condition and make sure that I am working on the right thing. Right? And that's something that's very interesting about them. And when you talk about the PDCA cycle, my boss always says, I'm going to go to the Gemba and I really want to be strict on this P because if Hide is not understanding the exact point that he wants me to work, we are in trouble. There's no way it's going to be successful. He's not going to tell me exactly what P he wants me to work on. We will go to the shop floor and give me a time to observe. I will come and say, okay, I think these are the three things. And he will say, nah, I agree with this one, but this one you need to think again. You need to come up with this one. And but every time I submit the A3, this first objective, I don't know how many times I have to remake it because it never goes through easy. And but at the same time, if I give like 10 points, he will say, no, that's too much. That's too much. You're crazy. You're not going to do that, right? So summarize it into 3, for example. And that's the coaching that I constantly get from him.
So the emphasis was on the P part, the planning part of the PDCA.
Yeah, he said it needs to be done in a very strict way. The boss and his follower needs to have a very serious observation and communication on this. Otherwise, your activity will fail. Right? And even this happens every day, right? When I reflect, I misunderstood the original objective of what he was. And that's where I go back and say, okay, I misunderstood. This is what I really do.
Yeah, sorry for disrupting your flow.
No, your question is great.
Okay.
And now I think about the history of TPS, right? And how can I say, if I start understanding this vertical and horizontal things, and I start to understand that, how incrementally Toyota implemented the system in a sort of like experimental way, because it started as the Ono method. It was something that Taichi Ono was doing by himself in his area in the machine shop, right? And because of that success, he got promoted. He's the manager of the machine shop, and he deployed Yokoten this inside the machine shop. Then he got transferred to assembly line. And he said in the book, he was very surprised that he was transferred. But I think his boss was Mr. Toyota at that point, AG Toyota, who's like the, I think the grandson of the founder or something. But he said, no, I want to see if this TPS works in the assembly line, right? Because then this can become a corporate-wide philosophy. And obviously on went and he succeeded. Then he got the promotion to become the plant manager. And his challenge there was, how can I integrate the assembly line and the machine shop using Kanbans and, material handlers and things like that. Then he will be promoted to the vice president of production control, Seisan Kanri, production management area. And that's where, the TPS is starting to get, office is starting and, more deployment. Like, I think this is the first time they went to the operation side. That means to the suppliers, right? And he made clear in a lot of book that say, hey, don't talk about Kanban system with the suppliers when you haven't improved your process inside, right? Kanban is a double-edged sword. It could bring benefit, but it could damage. So first thing, improve your internal side. Then talk about connecting to the external side. And he mentioned in several locations that they didn't even think about connecting to the suppliers until the connection between the assembly line and the machining line was perfected. Right. And then, Ono retires. And I mentioned about this gentleman called Mr. Kusunoki was one of the successor who used to be a mechanical engineer. And he succeeded, head of mechanical engineering. And he also succeeded the TPS function. And inside one of the book, he mentioned is that he was challenging his people is like, hey, we have TPS, we also have TQM and TBM. How can we integrate, right? Mm-hmm. So he didn't like the fact that we have so many pillars of activities. Hey, we should be working on one thing. And I think that was some kind of coordination that was happening before it became more coming to the US and stuff. And, Mr. Cho, the first president of the TMK, Kentucky, became the CEO of the Toyota. And then he started saying, okay, I want the TPS to be implemented corporate-wide. We're going to call it the Toyota way. But that should apply into non-manufacturing processes. I mean, they've been introducing TPS in the product design side, but he wanted to implement in more other different processes, more administrative side. And, that's how TPS have developed. And if I see this relationship between, they constantly introducing a change point in the system. They're introducing one by one, and they always establish this relationship between the people. It's not randomly happening. There's a detailed experimentation going on all the time to change this culture, and we learn step by step. And in terms of learning, there's a phrase in Japan called Shu-Ha-Ri. It came from this gentleman here. He is the founder of the tea ceremony, Sen no Rikyu. He started the tea party, kind of tea ceremony. And what he said is, important thing is, first step for anybody who wants to learn is to do the shu, which means to follow the standard. Or he said follow the kata. That's I forgot the Toyota kata came from this word, is like follow the standard. You copy what I do, and you will understand the thinking behind it. Then you have the ha stage. That means you break it, you improve it, you Kaizen it the way you think it's a little bit better. That way you learn more about this process. And then you go to a lead stage, be more creative, come up completely original ideas. So in the world of tea ceremonies, he started, but a lot of his followers started their own way of doing. Every one of them had a different cultural values. Like one of his students was a very crazy guy, and he started saying, "Oh, I want to destroy everything." He always destroyed all these tea pots and stuff, and then connect them with golds and make it this weird pot. But that was his style, and but he was a long-time student of this gentleman and understand the concept, and that's why he was able to create something very creative, but and his own way of doing things.
Just want to freeze you there, Obe-san, because there's a lot of discussion across saying that with respect to standard and standard work. So I want you to re-emphasize that you have to establish a standard first, and then the Kaizen, and then the creativity.
Yes.
I have a question for you as a Gemba man. When you go into a Gemba, there's no standard. Everything is fluctuating.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you come to the standard at that point of time? How do you establish the first standard?
How do I establish the first standard? It's an interesting
because
question.
It is fluctuating, right? So do you, how do you establish the first base? How do you do that?
It can be anything. There's a word, even in standardized work, Hyojun Sagyo, there's a what some people use a word, a different symbol for it, and that means just documentation. It doesn't matter how bad it is, just document something and start from there. You just have to improve it.
Yeah,
that's
so you look at something and then you document it. Are you looking at the best process over there, or what are you going to document?
Oh yeah, I will use the best operator for that point.
Pardon me?
But yeah, at the beginning, I would use the best operator. Yes, I will. Just to say, okay, this gentleman looks like he's performing well, so I will use him, or gentleman or anybody, but I will document that person's work first, try to deploy it, and then if somebody has a better idea, let's change it.
But you establish something.
Yeah, I need to establish something, yes.
It is not that you're waiting for everything to be okay and then you establish the standard.
I will not wait for everything to become okay, because then it could take forever.
Yes, I want you to say that loudly, because people are confused. They said, standard, let us do the flow first, and then the machine can become okay, then the la 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 la, and then we'll get the standard.
Yeah, I think we need to stand, how can I say, standardization cannot, how can I say, we cannot make it perfect. Like, we might find something new by standardizing and reach the higher level, but we have to start somewhere, and I always start with standardization regardless. And I know it's not perfect, but just tell me what's wrong and I will change that part.
So you establish that, and then you do Kaizen, and then you can become creative. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Thank you very much for reinforcing that.
Yes. But even when you become creative, the following sentence is what they always say is like, okay, you reach the lead level, right? You reach the creative level, but don't forget the basics.
What are the basics?
It's not stated here, but I think the basic exists inside the points. That's what I always think, right? Like I might come up with a completely new process, but I should not forget, like, for example, men, right? They need to see, or they need to be able to access safely, or some, like, there are certain points that we have to respect. And that's my understanding of the Shu-Ha-Ri, right? Is that every man-machine material method has some kind of basic points that we have to respect. And even if I become very creative, I should not deviate from that basic points, is my understanding. But this is yeah, this is the way that I think a lot of it started in the tea area, but a lot of they are applied to a lot of the samurai, how do you call it, the sword, swordmanship. And then it's still repeated in our area of training is like Shu-Ha-Ri. Keep the kata, follow the standards first, improve Kaizen, and be creative. And yeah, I've seen this, for example, inside the engineering group, right?
Mm.
You don't get a chance to buy new machines. You have to first understand that you must follow the standard. Go to the gemba, make sure that every standard of the machine is followed. If something problem happens, go back to the standard and understand what's wrong. Then you learn to improve that. That's the initial stage of engineering work. After 3-5 years of that experience on the gemba, then they start to get this challenge of okay, we're gonna buy this new equipment. But now you're gonna buy it, but don't buy the same machine. Come up with a lead, come up with a creative idea that will give us something different. And today I see a lot of rookies that goes to internet and find the new technologies and they buy it, but then you implement the shop floor, it doesn't work. And that's because they don't know how to follow the standard. They don't know how to improve according to that standard, improve the standard itself or understand why the standard was not kept and improve that factors. And they jump to new technology, which is beyond their capability to use it. And that's where a lot of companies make a mistake is you have a fancy new technology just sitting there and wasting your time and money. And that's how we get introduced to TPS too. Is like, okay, first step is follow the standard, right? I need to make sure that I just focus on following the standard. Then I start making ideas to improve, which these two steps might come very early and quickly, but after several rounds of this shoot and hop, you follow, you improve, you follow, you improve, you get a chance to become creative. Okay, now you get a chance to design a new line. You don't get that from day one. It's after a couple of years, and then you start saying, okay, if I can change the layout in a completely different way, how can I get more productivity? Then you might get after a couple of years of that, you might get another opportunity that's completely different. What lead you can come up with based on your experience of improvement. And that's how I got trained. Is like, I didn't get something fancy. And at the beginning, you might feel frustrated, but now after I look back, I really appreciate the time that, my bosses, not just my dad, but all these people who trained me, gave me a sort of my free time on the shop floor just to focus on following the standard, making small improvements. That is my baseline. And, without that, coming up with a creative idea sometimes means a completely disaster. And you understand that because, small thing means a lot.
Thank you very much for clarifying that about standard, do the Kaizen, go back to the standard, do Kaizen, and creativity can wait for some time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm again sorry to have stopped your flow of thoughts. Go ahead, Obe-san.
No, this is actually my final presentation. It's more sort of like summary and the whole story about, yes, TPS has a lot of influence from the Japanese culture, but I don't see any value to chase the superficial aspect of the Japanese culture, right? We should focus more on the structure of the culture, where, what are the points in line and areas that we have? And then please understand your own culture, right? It's more important to understand your culture and try to understand the vertical and horizontal relationship of trust. How in your society, in your factory, inside your factory, what kind of relationship exists? right? And it might, sometimes in my experience, was say even inside one factory, different areas might have a completely different relationships and different way of trust. And so, you know, we need to understand it to provide the right change. And I also said use the modern version of this kind of relationship. Like I said before, a lot of people want to use fear. It's not going to work. We know that from psychology. Our psychology study have developed well that, hey, if you really want to reach that creative condition, right, you shouldn't rely on fear. It should be based on trust. It should be based on that relationship come from an incremental development by giving them a good Kaizen or giving them something good that they would eventually trust you. And that's the relationship that we need to establish. And it goes back to this learning is always standardize, then improve it, and then become creative without forgetting the basics. And when I learn doing this, so when I'm doing the standardize, I shouldn't be thinking that this is just a routine work that I'm going. Every standardization, I should be thinking about, okay, what are the basic points? What are the basic points that I need to take away from this daily activity? So crystallize it, summarize into a point so that when you reach that creative stage, you don't destroy the basic points. You respect it so that you can develop in a better way. And that's like my summary of the Japanese culture and TPS. Yeah? Understand the structure and then understand the local structures in different places and then standardize, improve, and create.
I got a request for you. If you can go back to your third slide where you show the slide before. Okay, this mura we understand, or at least you explain. This mura is not inconsistent, although it's the sounds the same, but it's written differently. This means a village. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, this is the other culture that you have from the East. And can I have the next slide, sir? Can you have the next slide? This is just a slide before. Slide before, sir? Yes. Can you just explain this, the difference between the West and the East?
Yeah, so Western side is basically the Mura culture, village culture is more like a community alliance. Individuals will form alliance horizontally, and within that community, there's a rule.
Yeah.
And the Eastern side is the family centric, and I shouldn't say family, the head of the family centric. There is the father, the family father, or the central father, the main family, to say, right? The samurai has the how can I say, the oldest, not the oldest son, but there's a hierarchy between the families. And there's always a central family, and the current head of that family somewhat dictates everything. And he is the rule. There's no other rule. He is the rule.
Yeah, I like this. And I like your next slide also, where Toyota, Nayoga, where you were born, Nayoga.
Yeah, Nagoya.
Pardon me?
Nagoya.
Nayoga. Nayoga. Yeah. Okay, I'll come to Tokyo and you have to teach me how to pronounce that word. So this is a fusion of both, right?
Yeah. It happened to be a location where these two culture has been crashing constantly. It's on the most, how can I say? Yeah, there's a highway here. I mean, not highway in terms of cars, but for centuries, there's a big road that connects the East and the West. And this is the point where these two cultures crash. So there's a lot of battles having in this area. And that's why I think the culture mixing here. And that's created that unique balance.
I request you, I know it is a rework for you, but for understanding, can you come back to the slide on learning, That is the slide after that. After that. Yes, sir. Can you just freeze this for us for some time? The way I understand you, I'm just trying to understand you. First, establish the standard. You look at whatever is the best over there, and you establish that a standard, and then keep doing Kaizen on that. And don't be in a hurry to do creativity. Have I understood you right? And you started with a tea ceremony.
Yes. So the tea ceremony itself is already, it's a blend of Western and Eastern. Actually, it's probably, I would say, it's a blend of the West and the East. But right, but when the ceremony itself is very West, everybody is equal inside the ceremony, right? It doesn't matter what your position is. You forget about the outside world. When you come into the ceremony, we all follow the stand together. So it's a very village mullah type culture there. But then there's a master and a student in this relationship. And at the very beginning, this gentleman is saying, follow my way, right? I reached to this condition. I want to send some kind of message through the ceremony. And it's about wabi and sabi. So it's about, appreciating the little things in life. And there's a value to those things. So he wants everybody to copy his standard, his way of doing the teas, making the tea and enjoying it. And that way you understand this little detailed aspects that he designed inside his system has some kind of meaning to it. And you understand that by practicing that step. So when you want to improve it, you need to have some kind of reasoning behind why you want to improve it. Just to give one example, somehow this tea ceremony was done in a small room where the door is like the height of half of your body, like it's somewhere around here is where the door reaches. So you have to bend yourself, bow down and enter the ceremony. And he's saying that that looks very stupid, but for him it's important part of the standard. Why? Is it forces anybody to bow, right? Mm-hmm. No matter how high rank you are, to enter his ceremony, everybody have to bow and enter the world. And that's why you're showing the respect and everybody is equal. So by creating this intentional low entry, he's saying that that's how he wants to represent his philosophy of everybody respect each other and bow each other. Now, is that a really safe way, or is that very ergonomically the right way? I don't know, but that's what's happening.
Well, that's the message. There's a message that everybody is equal.
That was a message that he was trying to send from his kata, his standard. So, once nowhere, a lot of people follow his tea ceremony, but nobody has that kind of doorway anymore. They have a different version of that. Like, for example, they have like a curtain to enter the ceremony. And you have to open like that. And that's all, it's a simplified version without bending your back and hurting yourself, a modern version, but respecting his message, his philosophy that he wanted to create in this empire.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that culture part of it. And then I just want one more slide to trouble you a little more. Can I have that thing where there's a vertical where the Hoshin is said and everybody follows? Yes, sir. So what I understand is the leader sets what he wants, a target. Each of them decides how to do it. And then the boss keeps looking at the P part of it, the planning part of it. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, eventually he will look at PDCA, the whole cycle. But I think they will put a lot of focus on the P, on the Gemba. I think that part needs to be very strict. That's what my boss always said.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And probably you can show the horizontal one and then we close it. Thank you. Yes, there's the horizontal one.
Yeah. I probably have a lot more ideas on the vertical ones too, but at this point, sorry, I was disorganized. But there's a lot of horizontal relationships that we need to respect.
Excellent. And what I like is this concept of Doki, you say?
Yeah.
Where the batch comes together and they live together throughout their life, exchanging their ideas with each other.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Obe-san. There's a lot of good lesson, and I'll come back to you for more.
Thank you very much for organizing this, and I really appreciate this opportunity. And I look forward for seeing you again.
Yeah, so you can close your slide, and then we say sayonara.
Yes, sayonara.
You can close your slide. So,
oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. And I think it's late into your night. It must be around 11 o'clock. And it's time for you to go to sleep. And tomorrow you got to work. So thank you very much, Obe-san. And there are lots to learn, and people have understood, or we will try to communicate the importance of standard. That's what we want, and the culture and how it evolved. Thank you very, very much. These things we can't get it from one book, all the essence that you have learned in the history. So I'm coming back to you and catch up with you. And in case I can make it to Tokyo, and if you're there, I'll definitely come and meet you.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to stop recording. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.